After some time passed, the seasons changed. By now it was fully winter. Snow lay across the ground, thin at first, then steadily thicker as the days went by. The sky had changed with it, heavier, colder, quieter. In Iberian, the town moved differently now, slower, heavier coats, shorter conversations, steady breath in cold air. And inside the guild, Corvin had become a familiar constant. He was taking on more of the workload alongside James, slowly easing into responsibilities that were no longer just temporary help. But outside the guild walls, something larger was shifting. News had begun spreading across Concordia. At first it came from distant merchants, then travelers, then traders passing through Iberian itself. The Cadrisar Empire had suffered a financial collapse. Their paper currency, once trusted across entire regions, had become nearly worthless. Too many notes had been printed, far beyond the gold, silver, and bronze reserves meant to support them. And once people realized that truth, trust vanished almost overnight. Now the effects were spreading beyond the empire itself, even in Concordia, even in Iberian. Merchants no longer trusted paper notes. Most refused them entirely. Gold, silver, and bronze had once again become the preferred currency. It was almost like the world had taken a step backward. Corvin and James had spoken about it briefly throughout the day, not as scholars, but as men watching the foundations of nations quietly begin to shake. Late that afternoon, while both were still busy sorting through paperwork, the young woman working at the front desk stepped into James's office. "There's someone here asking for Corvin," she said politely. James looked up. "And who might that be?" She hesitated briefly. "A very large man, dark hair, some gray, broad shoulders. He said his name is Goran." A faint smile crossed James's face. "Well," he said calmly, looking toward Corvin, "I think that's enough work for one day." Corvin stood. "Thank you." James waved a hand dismissively. "I'll finish things here. Go on." As Corvin stepped into the guild hall, he spotted Goran immediately. The man stood near the entrance like a wall of stone, tall enough that the doorway itself seemed slightly too small for him. Broad shoulders, heavy frame, and despite the years beginning to show through strands of gray hair, age had done little to diminish the sheer presence the man carried. Goran turned slightly. "Corvin." Corvin nodded calmly. "Good to see you again, old friend." "And you." For a brief moment, both men simply stood there. Then Corvin asked, "So, how did the job go?" Goran exhaled quietly. "I have quite a story to tell." Then, after a short pause, "Perhaps somewhere else." Corvin nodded once. "Come, we can talk at my place." The two walked through Iberian's snow-covered streets. The trees stood empty now, stripped bare by winter. Lantern light reflected softly across the cobblestone roads, while cold wind moved between the buildings. For a while, neither of them spoke. Then Corvin finally glanced toward Goran. "You're not someone that gets unsettled easily." A pause. "And yet something clearly rattled you." Goran remained silent for several steps before finally speaking. "You remember the man I told you about?" Corvin nodded. "Jack White?" "Yes," Goran replied quietly. Another silence followed. Then, "That man scares me." Corvin slowed slightly. The answer clearly wasn't what he expected. "What do you mean?"
Goran's eyes remained fixed ahead. "I've dealt with dangerous people before. Soldiers, officers, nobles, mages." He shook his head slowly. "But there's something different about him." Corvin studied him carefully. "What, you think he caused the Kadrisa Empire's currency collapse?" For the first time, Goran looked directly at him. Then he spoke calmly. "I think kingdoms, empires, entire countries might one day fear Jack White more than they fear armies." Corvin's expression hardened slightly. "That's a dangerous statement." "Yes," Goran replied, "it is." They continued walking through the snow. Then Goran spoke again. "I'm almost certain he had something to do with the Kadrisa collapse." Corvin immediately shook his head. "One man can't do something like that. A normal man can't. But a man with an extraordinary understanding of power might." His voice stayed calm, controlled, which somehow made the words feel even heavier. "I still don't fully understand how he did it," Goran continued, "but from what I heard, from what I saw, I'm convinced he was the one pulling the strings behind the scenes." Corvin stayed silent for a moment. Snow crunched beneath their boots as they walked. Then finally, "This Jack White sounds less like a man and more like a disaster waiting to happen." Goran gave a faint nod. "The frightening part isn't what he wants." Corvin glanced toward him. "Then what is it?" Goran's eyes answered directly. "The methods he's willing to use to achieve it." The two continued walking through the winter streets of Iberian, neither speaking again for some time, because some conversations left behind no comfort, only questions. And now Corvin had far more questions than answers.